Really speaking, if one can, one should keep the parikamma going while doing those things. With the breathing, it's more a matter of being mindful of the breath than of thinking about it. In other words, one's aware of it all the time. And you don't have to be thinking about it. If you're thinking of something else, there's also an awareness there the whole time of the breathing. But sometimes that can only come with practice. When you've done enough practice, it'll automatically take place. Until then, best thing is to do it as you can. And the more often the better, that's all. If you have other things to do, one should be mindful of them too. But if you're mindful of the breathing, you'll probably be mindful of those things too, because the mindfulness is there. Mindfulness only becomes difficult when it's not there to start with.
Well, being mindful of the breathing, does that mean you have to be feeling the breath all the time, or just knowing the breath is going in and out?
You start by feeling, and really speaking, it goes on by feeling, but one forgets the feeling, and one just is aware of it, aware of the breath. It's more an awareness of it than actually looking at it or watching it. After all, it's called anapanasati. Sati is the word there, mindfulness. Mindfulness of breathing, that's what it's labelled. And the idea is to keep the mindfulness on the breathing as much as you can.
I've heard some teachers say that you shouldn't interfere with the breath, just watch it as it is. And others say it should be breathing in and out long to start with, which to me would be I'd have to. And to me it feels more easeful and calming to make it longer.
I would say here, when you're starting off, if you find you can't calm the mind, then make it long for 4 or 5 breaths. And then let it go. It's better not to do it for a long time. But you want to be able to do the practice without having to be thinking of the breath. In other words, you do it and let the breath go naturally. But at first you may have to use long breaths to calm yourself down, to calm down the thoughts. And then you let go of the breath. Let it go its own way. The thing is really it's mindfulness of breathing, not an exercise in breathing. It's the mindfulness is just on the breath as it is, at any time. And the idea is you can keep it going all the time, knowing that you just have the awareness of the breathing being long or short or whatever it is, however it's going. I mean, if you're doing exercise, walking or anything of that sort, it's obviously going to be a bit longer because you're needing more air, and you breathe longer and deeper. And if you're sitting down, it becomes much more shallow. But one should really be aware of it just as it is.
Could you say briefly about Vipassana meditation and its benefits?
Vipassana means Pañña, same thing. Means investigation. If you can do the Vipassana or develop Pañña without restless thoughts taking over, then you can do it. If you can't do that, you must first develop samadhi. If you start off investigating or looking at the body, say, and then you find the mind jumps away all the time and it becomes very restless, then one must go to samadhi to calm it down, to quell it like that. But if one can keep the mind on the investigation, wherever you're investigating, using wisdom, and you can keep it there without it jumping away, then all right, you can do it. The advantages of it, really depends what type you're using. If you're using the contemplation of the body, then the advantage is that you see the body. You see it as it really is. It brings you to see it as it really is. At first you don't see it like that, but by repetition and continually going on, you'll find that it comes out, the understanding of the body starts developing. And you'll find when it starts to develop, then the mind gets into the state where it becomes aware of the body. And it remains in that state. Can remain for a long time. And then wherever you go in the body, you see it clearly. When you see it clearly like that, then the nature of the body starts becoming revealed to one. And you come to see very clearly that this body isn't mine. It belongs to the world. It comes from the world. And it goes back to the world. I can't stop it. And because of that, this thing isn't mine at all. I've just grabbed it for use. And the realization of that then shows you that when this body dies, I don't die. All that happens is the body dissolves, the four namakandas, that's feeling, memory, thought, consciousness, those die away, but the chitta is still there, it doesn't die. And usually, if one hasn't gained enough, then one comes back again and gets a new body. But the advantage is that the fear of that, of the body, the fear of death, disappears, gets less and less and disappears. That's one of the main advantages of it. The other advantage is that by seeing the body, you're not fooled by other people. You see what other people, you see what they are. You see that they're bodies. And what you think of a person is 90% is body. And the body is the thing which displays the attitude of the person and the what they're saying and thinking and so on. It's the body that's doing this. All of our communication, all of our normal communication depends on the body. Because of that, if you don't have a body, no communication. And to know the body, you see the value of this communication. What is it? Is it something that really matters or not? Sometimes it does matter in certain ways, but most of it doesn't. The seeing of the body also shows us the nature of the world. Because this body, because it relies on the world influences it. And if one's not careful, the world can harm it. If you fall down, it hurts. You get bruises and things. That's because the body and the world are made of much the same type of substance. They're not different. One realizes this and sees it. And generally speaking, we can say one is reducing one's delusion. The delusion starts to get less and less and less. And this is the advantage. Because when the delusion gets less, one gets lighter. It's as though you're dropping a burden. And there's more contentment. There's less of sort of trouble, and there's less thinking, less criticism, less wanting. Altogether, things start to die away like that. But it also does depend on one's character. Some characters, if they do that and they find that after doing the practice, maybe the next day, anger comes up, resentment, trouble, and they feel, as they say, like a bear with a sore head. If it's like that, then probably that person should do the samadhi practice first.
A few years ago I had the opportunity to go to Iran to see you. I remember in that discussion at one point we were talking about developing perception of anatta. Some people really want to see anatta, but they're not ready for it, and they do actually see it, and they just get so afraid of this that they just go crazy or disrobe. So can you explain what's going on here?
Yes, you can like that. Anatta or anicca, both can be devastating.
How can one prepare oneself then for such an insight?
By doing the ordinary practice, developing the samadhi until it's good, and then going on to the investigations. And when you start the investigations based on samadhi, you can go to anatta or anicca, and it won't do any harm then. The samadhi will hold it. The thing is that without having the samadhi, some people can stand it. There are some people who are capable of standing what they see, in other words. It depends very much on the emotions. I divide the body into two parts. Emotions down here, down in the lower part, the intellect up the top. The intellect does the bidding of the emotions. The emotions are the boss. They're the ones in charge. They're the ones that push you about. And that's where the kilesas are. And the intellect is like a pair of hands. It's very useful. Does a lot of work. But the intellect isn't the boss. And because of this, you get people who develop the intellect a great deal, because that's pushed nowadays, intellectual development, and they can become top-heavy, which means that the emotions are not developed enough to stand the intellectual development, and they can get into big trouble. Some go mad, some commit suicide, some just get into a thoroughly bad state of mind. But if a person's emotions are strong and the intellect's weak, they're quite stable, but not very clever. That's the way of it. And the samadhi is what develops the emotions. To see anatta, or self, to see anicca, is really quite devastating, because anatta means to say that one sees that I'm not this. I'm not what I think I am. And it can cause a lot of difficulty there, a lot of trouble. Ajahn Mahabua has said, generally he said, when you're practicing sila and samadhi, you should think in terms of self and the development of self. When you turn and do Pañña, the development of Pañña, you should see everything as anatta. When you break through, you chuck out both atta and anatta. You go free from them. They're both like forms of delusion.
Is sense contact inherently dukkha, or only when it's attached?
Ajahn Kao said that bodily feeling, which is one form of sense contact, he said all bodily feeling is dukkha. This may have been just his view or his experience, but for him it seemed all bodily feeling was dukkha. He said that. In the text you get that bodily feelings either can be sukha or dukkha or neutral, but it depends probably on the person and the character, how one sees that. The other senses, the actual sense contact is neutral. There's no sukha or dukkha. If you see something and then you feel dukkha, the dukkha comes from the memory association. and not from the actual seeing. Whereas when you get feeling, it can come directly from the feeling. It doesn't have to be associated with anything. In other words, you touch a hot iron and ouch, you jump. Quick, it's very quick. Whereas you see something you don't like, you just ponder on it a little bit and turn away. So the sense contact really, it depends on what type. On the senses through sight, hearing, smell and taste. These are give neutral feeling. It's only feeling contact which is either sukha or dukkha.
In the time of the Buddha, many of the Arhats would spend much of the day absorbed in jhana. And one would think that if there were no kilesas there, if they had no dukkha, what would be the purpose?
The purpose is vihara dhamma, dwelling in ease. It's the body of the Arahant would obviously be very sensitive, and maybe a lot of them, like Tanshan Kao, found all bodily sensation dukkha. And so they go into the state of jhana just for ease. It's easier like that. It's like having a rest.
You can say something about tada, confidence. Tada, confidence.
Yes.
Buddha Dhamma Sangha.
Yeah.
So you can say something to develop this tada.
Saddha.
Sada.
Yeah. Yes, saddha is important. Many people have come from another tradition, Christianity for example, and they've had faith pushed at them. You must have faith in God, and this has been pushed at people, and they've got fed up with it, and they throw everything away there, and they get the idea that saddha is not necessary, faith is not necessary. But it is necessary. You can't just chuck it out like that. And the development of saddha can help a great deal. Can help to overcome a lot of the dosa, the anger that many people tend to get. Saddha can help one with great confidence, have confidence. It can help one in keeping sila, because one keeps sila knowing that this rule was put out by the Buddha. Because it was put out by the Buddha and we have saddha, so we keep it, even though we may not see the reason for it. And it's very important, saddha. And the way to develop it is various. If one finds saddha difficult, then if the person tends to be a bit intellectual, they can read the text and see the reasoning in Buddhism. That reasoning can give confidence. When one gains confidence, then saddha can arise. One has confidence in it, and confidence and saddha are very close. When one has confidence, the saddha can arise in one quite easily. And because one must have confidence, in fact, to get saddha, I would say, if you haven't already got it. But also one can say that the practice of chanting, of reading the suttas, all this helps. But actually the best help one can get is some success in samadhi. If you get some success in samadhi, you see the results of the practice, you see that they're good, and you know that they're good, and in that way the saddha becomes very strong. It's unfortunate that quite a number of people become bhikkhus and they can't get anywhere in the practice, and they don't, for a long time they don't get any real development, and then they give up the robe. and the saddha tends to go. This can happen with quite a lot of people. And it's very important to try and get some experience which is good. If one can get that, that can confirm one in the nature of Buddhism and the value of it.
How do you feel about the standard of practice in the forest tradition these days, and what dangers do you see possible?
The standard of practice generally, I would say, has deteriorated. And it's deteriorated because of the dangers. And the dangers are what we call civilization. So often the bhikkhu is diverted into things which cause interest, or works in the world which cause interest, news which becomes interesting, all sorts of things in the world that would pull one out all the time. And the advent of radio, television, video, computers, internet, all the rest, all this is tending to deteriorate the Sangha. In the old days, there was none of these things. Because if they wanted to go somewhere, they had to walk. Nowadays we jump in a car and we're there in no time. And this makes people tend to move about much faster. And when one moves, one breaks the practice. One must see that these things can all be all be things which break up the practice. They're disadvantages to us nowadays. And one must review oneself really to see how much of this is harming my practice. Probably the ideal is if one can get to a more remote place where one can get down to the practice properly. But one mustn't do it when one first starts. To start with, one's got to learn a lot of things when one's first ordained. One must learn things, and one must be with other bhikkhus, with other people. And then one's got to learn things, and one can learn a great deal in that. While one's with other people, and in a wat, with other bhikkhus, one has to learn how to get on with them. One has to learn how to behave in the ways of a bhikkhu. One has to learn how other people have got other views from one's own, and one has to be fairly tolerant in listening to those views and considering them. Maybe some of them are better than one's own. And generally one has to, in fact, give way a lot to other people. And this is a very good training. It's a training in cutting down self. And that's one of the big things one should do. Kamma is volition. It's the intentional doing of an act. Though it doesn't have to be with realization. Somebody can be talking, and they put their hand in their pocket, pull out a cigarette, put it in their mouth, light it. They don't even know they're doing it. But there's volition there, all the same. So it can be with or without knowing. But kamma means volition, and that volition, or the volitions of kamma, build up oneself and make one what one becomes. One has become this that one is now because of one's kamma, because of one's actions in the past, because of the volitions one's made. And we go on into the future making more volition. And again we go on, and we change and vary according to what kamma we make. because of that it's extremely important. The results of karma come up when the situation is suitable for them to come up. And you can never say when that's going to be. The way in which karma works is so complex and difficult to understand that the Buddha said that one shouldn't try and work out all the ins and outs of karma. Too complex. But one should look at one's own karma and see one's own karma as far as one can. And you can see what faculties you've got, what tendencies. And one should know that these come from karma. And if you want to change them, you have to change the karma. And gradually you will change. Many people think that karma is just the very good and the very bad acts we do, but that's not the case. We're making karma all the time. Even little things. You get an itch and you scratch it like this. That's karma. Why? Because the itch is dukkha. And we want to overcome the dukkha, and the wanting creates that. Even things like that are karma. Because of that we're making it all the time. And this is one of the reasons why we must be mindful. Mindful of the type of karma we're making. Another thing is to realize is that the only thing that can make karma is the chitta. The five khandhas can't make karma. The five khandhas are like things in the world. They're neutral. But the chitta is the only one that has the power to make karma. The chitta is the one which is creative. In other words, it creates situations. And when it creates them, that's karma. And when it's created a situation, that karma has got to give its result. It's rather like if you wind up a clock, that spring is going to unwind somewhere. It may unwind gradually, the clock may stop and the thing remains wound, may go on for some time until one day, bang, it goes. It's rather like that. Once you've wound it up, it's bound to unwind. And karma is winding it up.
Creating these different situations is also a result of our past karma.
No, the past karma gives results. You can see it in Paticca Samuppada. What comes out of the past karma is feeling. And the feeling is just a neutral thing, it's just a result. But we react to the feeling, and that's karma. Karma is our reaction.
So then if we don't create those situations, how we react to them is 100% related to our past karma. So how we're going to relate to the situations that arise, whether we're going to be neutral to it.
The only thing you can do is in whatever way that karma arises to act appropriately. What I mean by that, if something comes up to make you angry, you have to hold the anger. You have to learn how to do it. If something comes up where somebody hits you on the head, you have to control yourself not to hit them back on the head. It's rather like that. One has to, in other words, accept that this is my karma. It's my own fault that I've done it, and I'm getting the results of it. And I have to put up with it, without reacting. If you can do that, the karma starts to die away.
How can we not only do that if we have a supportive karma to bear up to those situations? If we don't have the supportive karma to bear up to those situations, we're going to react to them negatively, or would that be correct? Or?
No, the thing is that the only karma one must have to do that is the karma that's produced one's character. And if that's good karma, then you can find the method of overcoming the bad karma. If it's bad karma you've got, well, it's rough, put it like that. And if the karma is bad enough, the person probably just wouldn't become a bhikkhu anyway. You can say. The karma is very important, and one mustn't underrate its importance. Most bhikkhus, I think, when they develop, they get a very great respect for karma. They're very careful not to make bad karma, because they know it's going to come back and clobber them as they do. You see the sort of things that happen. It's quite extraordinary sometimes how a person, they go from home to their work every day like that. One day they think, oh, I'll go off this trim path here. And something happens there. It's almost as though they've steered themselves into the result of that karma, as though something comes up in them to make them do it. You don't know why. The things which come from the past are it means the sankharas which link one from one life to the next. And those sankharas are the basis of one's karma. And those sankharas make one grasp at birth. And they then, should we say that they then program that which has been grasped at with the karma of the past.
In Mahayana they have this concept of the alaya, storehouse concept.
Yeah.
Do you think that's a correct model or a useful model?
I'm not sure how useful it is really. Because they can't find anything, they have to create it. It's really a symbolic thing. Truly, to understand this, one has to look at our total situation and see what it is, and to see the whole of the world and the whole of our life, everything. It's all illusory. When you realize that, there's no need for a liar. The alaya consciousness, it's unnecessary. You see, a liar consciousness brings in the idea of time, something taking from the past to the future. We have to realize that time is a delusion. There's only one time that exists, and that's the present. You can't find the past. How can you? If you went back into the past, there'd have to be two of you. You might start quarreling then.
Karma is volition, Jaitina and Pali, and that the chitta is what empowers the karma.
Yeah.
But often in the text they classify Jaitina as a sankhara. As one of the five aggregates, usually they do it that way. How do you understand that?
Oh, the thing is, the chitta has to make karma by reacting on the five skandhas. Won't make it on its own. But it gets hold of, let's say, it goes into sankharas and empowers that to act in certain ways. Because the chitta on its own can't do anything with all this. It's not like that. It wants to play in the world, and so it grasps the body. Then it grasps the factors of consciousness, and it makes the body and the mind work in these ways that we know very well in ourselves. And in the doing of that, it makes these things go in certain directions. And the sankharas are one of the sort of big playthings with, and it pushes them to go around like this.
Is this empowerment like before or a precursor to actual Jaitina that you have as a sankhara? Sankara? Not quite sure I understand.
As I understand it, the 5 khandhas are quite passive, and the chitta is the one which goes into these and pushes them about, makes them do things. The khandhas have the capacity to do things in the world, because they're part of the world, really, and the chitta can react on these. Normally it can't react directly on the things of the world. In some ways it may be able to with psychic methods, but that's a bit out of the normal. The normal state of things is that the chitta must react in the world through the 5 khandhas. The 5 khandhas are their medium. But because the chitta is not part of the world, they can't list it in the books, really, as a proper factor. You do get in the Dhammasangani the different types of chitta that arise, and that displays it quite clearly that you get the chitta with these chaitasikas, they're called. Chaitasika means the factors involved in the chitta. When you have these chaitasikas there, then the chitta operates through them onto the type and makes the type of chitta forms the type of chitta there. In other words, it's like someone playing a piano. They've got lots of notes there, they can make a lot of noise out of it. And the chitta can be like that person playing the piano. He plays with the sankharas, or with the rest of it. I mean, he'll play with all the khandhas like that. But without the chitta there, they're dead.
Well, in the Dhammasangani, I thought the chitta is synonymous with vijnana, which would be a khandha.
It's synonymous with vijnana when it's active. But if it goes into a state of nirodha, vijnana's gone. Vijnana's inactive. And it goes into vijnana because vijnana is the one that knows. And knows in association with the chitta. And so whatever sensation goes in, the vijnana knows it. But you can see the importance of it because in the Dhammasangani, the chitta is listed as, this is a type of chitta. And what it means by the type of chitta is that the chitta has these associated factors, the chaitasikas. And if you go into the Pañña, huge book, that you find the relationships as well. And the Pañña, I think there's 5 volumes of it, and it goes into all the relationships, how one thing relates to another, and so on. It's very complex. I haven't read it. The chitta is really a difficult one for most people, partly because it's not material. It's not something you can sort of pin down. But Lin Chi, I believe he called it the true man of no position, something like that. That comes from the Chinese, I believe. It's a translation of the Chinese anyway. And he says how you who are listening here, when you're listening, there's the chitta is right there before you, or this man is there before you, knowing it all the time. As soon as you try to look for him, he's gone. The reason is, of course, that the chitta can't look at the chitta like that. It's like the knife trying to cut itself. The nature of the chitta, when it's developed, is bright, and it gives rise to the phenomena of light, seeing light. The light is created by the chitta. but exactly why that should be so, I don't know. It just seems to be a phenomenon, just a thing that happens. I can't tell you why. This is the nature of the citta when it is developed. But the citta that's not developed is still there as the citta. Citta with kilesas is there as the citta. And even if it's not developed, it's still there. It still has to play about with the khandhas and things. But the citta, the bright citta, will be probably in a state of meditation or in quite a high state, quite reasonably high. Puru can be the citta, the pure citta, but it can also be vijnana. Depends on what's known. If it's knowing in the world, it's the puru in the world. That is the nature of the citta in the world. If it's puru in one of the higher states, then that's internal. It's an internal thing, and it can be just bare knowing, without any content. But one mustn't think that that's nibbana.